Well, it is all over for the grifters of Oz. So long, farewell, Meghan, or just call me Meg, as she apparently likes to go by, and her spare handbag, Harry, have finally left Australia after a whirlwind circus.
March 18th, Sydney, a reception hall near the harbour, the moment that quietly shifted everything. Names were whispered before they were even announced, glances exchanged before hands were shaken, and by the time Prince Harry stepped forward, something already felt off. Not loud, not chaotic, just a subtle, unmistakable distance. The kind palace insiders later described as a silence louder than applause. And at the center of it, Meghan Markle, standing composed but somehow disconnected from the warmth that once followed her so easily. What unfolded that evening didn't look like rejection in the traditional sense. There were no headlines in that moment, no dramatic walkouts. But according to sources close to the royal circuit, something far more uncomfortable took place. An unspoken shift in perception, a quiet pulling back that left Harry visibly unsettled. Those who had watched him over the years noticed it immediately. The slight hesitation, the forced smile, the way his usual confidence seemed just a little misplaced. Palace aides, speaking cautiously, suggested this wasn't about one event. It was the culmination of a growing tension, an invisible line forming between public expectation and personal presentation. And as the evening progressed, that line became harder to ignore. Harry and Meghan, the shift no one could ignore. There's always been a contrast between how they present themselves and how they're received, but insiders claim Australia brought that contrast into sharp focus. A palace staff member quietly noted that while Meghan maintained her signature composure, the usual ease in her interactions felt slightly strained, as if every gesture was being more carefully measured than before. Observers close to the event described a noticeable difference in engagement. Conversations that should have flowed instead felt brief, polite, but distant. A royal aide later hinted that Harry seemed more aware of this than anyone else in the room. His reactions, though subtle, suggested he was reading the room and not liking what he saw. Behind the scenes, whispers began to circulate. Not harsh criticisms, but questions. Questions about alignment, about identity, about whether their narrative still resonated the way it once did. One palace insider described it as a moment where perception quietly shifted and no one could quite stop it. King Charles and Prince William, the silent watchers. While the event took place thousands of miles away, sources suggest that King Charles III and Prince William were far from unaware. According to a senior palace aide, updates from international visits are followed closely, especially when public sentiment becomes unpredictable. There were no official statements, no visible reactions, but insiders claim the atmosphere within royal circles grew noticeably more cautious. Not hostile, just watchful, as if certain developments were being noted, quietly filed away for future consideration. A former palace staff member suggested that moments like these are rarely about immediate consequences. Instead, they shape long-term perceptions, influencing how roles are viewed and how relationships evolve behind closed doors. And in this case, the shift wasn't dramatic, but it was undeniable. There were even murmurs, carefully phrased, about how public reception in different parts of the world was beginning to vary more than expected. Not rejection in a blunt sense, but a cooling, a distance. And for a couple whose identity has been so closely tied to global connection, that subtle change carried weight. Australia and the unspoken verdict. Australia has always held a unique place in royal dynamics, often seen as both welcoming and quietly discerning. According to local sources, the reception Harry and Meghan received wasn't negative, it was something more complex. Polite, respectful, but lacking the enthusiasm that once defined their visits. A local event organizer, speaking discreetly, mentioned that the crowd response felt measured. Not cold, but not warm either. And in royal terms, that distinction matters more than most realize. Royal guards and staff who have witnessed countless visits noted that public energy often tells a deeper story than headlines ever could. And this time, the energy felt reserved, as if admiration had been replaced by observation. For Harry, insiders believe this was the most difficult part. Not criticism, not confrontation, but the quiet realization that something had shifted beyond his control. Meghan, as always, maintained her composed exterior, but even that composure seemed to carry a different weight under these circumstances. What makes this moment so significant isn't what was said, but what wasn't. No dramatic statements, no visible conflict, just a subtle, collective pause. And in the world they navigate, that pause can speak louder than anything else. The real question now, according to those close to the palace, isn't what happened in Australia, but what it means moving forward. Because in royal circles, perception isn't just image, it's influence. And once that begins to change, everything else tends to follow. The quiet aftermath did not stay quiet for long. Within hours of their departure from Australia, the tone inside royal circles began to shift in a way that insiders described as measured but unmistakable. No sudden declarations, no visible confrontation, but a recalibration. According to palace sources, what happened publicly had triggered something far more delicate behind closed doors, where perception is often treated as power itself. There were discussions, careful, controlled, and far from emotional. A senior palace aide revealed that moments like these are not seen as isolated incidents, but as indicators. Indicators of direction, of influence, and of how narratives are evolving beyond the palace's reach. And in this case, the narrative surrounding Prince Harry and Meghan Markle appeared to be entering a phase that even their closest observers had not fully anticipated. What unsettled many was not the reaction itself, but its consistency. It wasn't a single comment, a single look, or a single interaction. It was the pattern. The repeated sense, as described by a palace staff member, that something once effortless had become deliberate. Harry and Meghan, the image that began to slip. Inside sources suggest that for years, Harry relied heavily on instinct during public appearances, reading the room, adapting, connecting. But in Australia, that instinct seemed to meet resistance. Not rejection in a direct sense, but a kind of hesitation from the public that disrupted the rhythm he was known for. A palace nanny who had observed multiple royal tours quietly mentioned that Harry's demeanor carried a subtle tension, as if he was trying to recover something intangible in real time. Meghan, on the other hand, remained composed, but insiders claim her composure felt more guarded than natural, as though every movement was calculated to maintain control of a narrative that was no longer fully cooperating. There were even whispers among palace staff that the balance between them had shifted slightly. Not dramatically, but enough for seasoned observers to notice. Harry appeared more reactive while Meghan remained steady, but that steadiness, according to one insider, felt less like confidence and more like containment. And it was in that subtle imbalance that questions began to grow. King Charles and William, calculations behind closed doors. Back in royal circles, the response from King Charles III and Prince William remained outwardly silent, but internally, sources suggest there was a shift toward caution. Not alarm, but awareness. A recognition that global perception, once firmly aligned, was beginning to show cracks. A palace insider revealed that discussions were not centered on blame, but on positioning. How each member of the royal family is perceived matters deeply, especially when those perceptions begin to diverge across different regions. And Australia, known for its balanced but perceptive public, had quietly sent a message that could not be ignored. There were even murmurs, never confirmed but consistently hinted at, about long-term implications. Not immediate actions, but strategic distancing. The kind that doesn't announce itself, but becomes visible over time through fewer associations, fewer shared narratives, fewer moments of alignment. One royal guard reportedly described it in simple terms: nothing changes overnight, but everything starts somewhere. The wider circle, titles, tensions, and unspoken judgments. Beyond the immediate family, the ripple effects extended into the broader royal network. Names like Queen Camilla and Catherine, Princess of Wales, began to surface in quiet conversations, not as participants in conflict, but as contrasting figures within the same evolving narrative. According to a former palace staff member, comparisons, once avoided, were now becoming unavoidable. Not publicly, not officially, but within the private assessments that shape long-term roles and reputations. Catherine's consistent public reception, often described as steady and warm, stood in quiet contrast to the more fluctuating responses Harry and Meghan were beginning to encounter. This contrast, insiders suggest, wasn't being used as criticism, but was being noted. Carefully, repeatedly. There were also subtle discussions about titles, not removal, not enforcement, but significance. What titles represent, how they are perceived, and whether their weight changes when public sentiment begins to shift. A palace aide hinted that these conversations are rarely about action, they're about perception, and how that perception evolves over time. Meanwhile, those closest to the situation described an undercurrent of tension, not explosive, not confrontational, but persistent. The kind that lingers beneath formal appearances and carefully managed statements. As one source close to the royal household put it, it's not about one moment, it's about what that moment reveals. And what Australia revealed, according to those watching closely, was not a collapse, but a turning point. A subtle, undeniable shift in how Harry and Meghan are seen, both within royal circles and beyond them. The real consequence of that shift may not be immediate. It may unfold slowly, quietly, through changes that are never officially announced but gradually become impossible to ignore. Because in their world, influence is not declared, it's observed. And once observation turns into doubt, the path forward becomes far more complicated than any headline could ever capture.